Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining. What we're going to be doing today is this is the second webinar of a webinar series that we're calling Community Safety Beyond Policing. Tonight, we're going to be hearing from organizers from St. Louis, Chicago, Oakland, and they're going to be sharing different strategies, different successful strategies that have worked, as well as hurdles that have came up in their work in their fight to get police out of schools. Before we start this conversation, a lot of us have had a long day. You know, it's pretty late in the evening now. So before we go on to our conversation, we're gonna have a minute of grounding. So in front of you, I have some grounding affirmations, and we're gonna try to let go of the day's stress and all the worries of the day, and kind of recenter and readjust ourselves for the conversation. So I'm going to ask you all to read them. You're all muted. So you can go ahead and read them out loud to yourselves as I read them out loud to you. And we're going to be taking some deep breaths as we say these affirmations. So the first one is, I'm letting go of today's stress. I am letting go of today's stress. Followed by, my muscles are relaxed. And I want you to physically feel your muscles relaxing as you say that. Right now, I am letting go of fear and worry. This is also going to help with our conversation. We want to get rid of any fear, any worries, so we can really dive into this concept of getting police out of schools. And lastly, I am calm and centered. So we're going to take a second and ground ourselves here. Thank you. Next, what we're going to do is, after we have centered a little bit, what we're going to do is come into some community agreements. So what we're trying to do is we want to ensure that we're creating a space that is open and inclusive for people to be able to participate. We want to foster and create a community within ourselves right now that are going to allow people to participate, being their best selves in a setting that they feel that they can really step into. So on the screen, we see some community agreements. I'm going to read them, and we're going to agree that these are some things that we can stick to and agree with moving forward in our conversation. The first one is, we are agreeing to seek collective learning. So we're not here to tell anyone what is right and what is wrong, but rather to engage in a conversation and learn collectively in this together. When we are speaking, we want to ensure that we are speaking from our truths, our lived experiences. We want to make sure that as we're talking about schools and police and these issues, that we are considering our privilege in the space and how that can often frame our narrative and our lived experiences. So these are just a few community agreements. We also want to encourage everyone to use the chat throughout this conversation. Anything that's coming up for you, some questions that you're having, we can hopefully address them, if not right away, hopefully in breakout groups or in the closing, or also in the panel. So please use the chat throughout this conversation. And also, I want to open up some space for you all to type in the chat any ideas that you have for community agreements. So what would you like for us to all adhere to make sure that we are really creating an environment of being welcoming and inclusive, so we can all have a safe conversation together in which we can dive in and learn from each other. And while people are thinking of that, I'm going to introduce the next person who is going to speak. Before we talk about why we talk about why we should get police out of schools, let's hear from Jonathan about why is this even a problem? So he's going to explain to us a little bit about the school to prison pipeline.
Thank you, Fatima. So my name is Jonathan Pofis, and I'm the St. Louis Peace Program Associate. I'm out of St. Louis, Missouri. And I'm tasked with talking about, just introducing what the school to prison pipeline is, go big picture and talk about some facts and some statistics. So Dr. King in 1967, he wrote this book called Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community. And when we talk about where do we go from here, we want to kind of talk about what is the here. And so think about living in 1967, and there's some overlap with even things happening today, but it was complete chaos. You had police brutality, schools, restaurants, and buses were segregated. You had the Vietnam War, you had voting rights violations, you had a series of different things, media disparity in communities. But when you talk about, you take a step back from the here, and you talk about where do we go, what he was aiming for was this idea of beloved community. This idea of being a good neighbor, serving the needs of community, and sharing space. So like, what was his point? Either we're going to share space, i.e. the beloved community, or we're going to monopolize space, i.e. creating chaos, hence the title of his book, Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community? And Dr. King, I posit is he's saying that we should share space. We should encourage being, polite to one another. We should be good neighbors. We should, serve the needs of community. And so the problem is that monopolizing space has led to this thing we know as the school to prison pipeline, which I define as the process of harassing and intimidating young people, particularly Black young people, instead of fighting for and loving them. So there's this author and professor named Mark Lamont Hill who talks about how America uses these tools to pretty much render people as nobodies. And so I posit that we discard young people as nobodies because often the society treats them as just less than human. And you don't have to say that. It's reflected in the disparities in the numbers. So according to the ACLU, the national data, when it comes to suspensions, Black students make up 16% of public school enrollment, but account for 42% of those who have been suspended. White students make up 51% of school enrollment, but constitute 31% of students who serve suspensions. And those have implications on economic levels as well. When you look at the AP, the Associated Press national data, unemployment rate among African Americans is twice that of whites. We talk about sources for retirement down the line. Older African Americans and Latinos are at 14% compared to 4% when it comes to whites. And there's money being made off of prisons, right? There's food from the commissary. There's staff to get paid to police you. Beds are literally being made off of test scores. And so these are the tools Mark Lamont Hill is referencing when he speaks to this idea of America using tools to render people as nobodies. When it comes to policing, the young person's body is nobody, so we're discarded like it's nobody's. When it comes to this Eurocentric curriculum we often teach in schools, your past is nobody, so therefore we'll disregard that as nobody's. When you talk about like a lack of counselors and restorative peacekeepers, your mind and emotions are nobody's, so we're going to treat it like it's nobody's. Standardized testing, the way you learn is nobody, so we're going to treat it like it's nobody. So all these tools are used to monopolize space and render young people's bodies, young people's experiences as obsolete. And young people speak about this all the time. If you ask them, if you talk to them, one young person we worked with, we interviewed for this documentary called Pipe Dreams, talked about how in class, and this was a freshman in high school, he would make jokes and stuff, but his work would be done. He'd make jokes in class, and they responded to that comedy with calling security in. That's how we respond to young people comedy. Another young person talked about this experience where she was pretty much, done with her work, and there was a ruckus that happened in class. She ended up getting put out the class and got rolled up for detention. Meanwhile, at that same school, there were two white students who were fighting, and they got a warning. They didn't get detention; they got a warning. And so I say all that to say that when going back to King's message around chaos or community, idea of beloved community, are we going to be bystanders or are we going to be good troublemakers, in the word of the late and great congressman that just passed? Are we going to be good troublemakers? See, Kitty Genovese was murdered 4 years before Dr. King. And when Kitty Genovese was murdered, this was in 1964. Dr. King writes that book in 67, dies in 68. Kitty Genovese was his bar manager. She was 28 years old. When the attacker assaulted Kitty Genovese, one of the witnesses said, "Hey, leave her alone." The attacker ran away, came back 10 minutes later only to complete the attack. Nobody responded because they thought that somebody was going to do something about it. And so the question I pose is, what are the ways in which we as a society and as people concerned with this work act as bystanders instead of good troublemakers in the face of a world that renders young people as nobodies. A beloved community is not a space without conflicts and misunderstandings or tensions. Transformations are based off people pushing to share space. That's my alarm. And so I'm gonna go ahead and pass it off to Lewis, who's going to introduce the panelists who are going to share how they are building community instead of chaos by doing this work in their own cities. Thank you all.
Thank you, Jonathan. The school to prison pipeline, as you shared, is certainly one of the negative outcomes of having police in schools. But I think we all know that there are vast other injustices that result from having that type of presence in institutions that are really designed for learning. And so I'm really excited to share with you the opportunity to hear from people who realize that this injustice has to be stopped and have started very local campaigns. Some have been successful, some are finding their way, but it's going to be real exciting to hear this work firsthand. And what we're going to do is we're going to give each of the 3 campaigns or 4 campaigns an opportunity to share their work. It'll be relatively brief. Then we'll have a few minutes to engage in a brief conversation with them that hopefully will further provide us with some understanding of why we need to get police out of schools. There is a space for you to put some questions in the chat, and provided we have time, we will lift up some of those questions during the conversation. Does that sound okay? Yeah. Okay.
Lewis,
Yes.
I just want to ask all our speakers to make sure to speak somewhat slowly because we have a captioner. I just want to make sure that we're able to capture all the good stuff for everybody. Thank you.
Okay, I will certainly slow down and hopefully you all will follow my example. Okay. So we're going to start with the Real Student Safety Campaign. And this is a campaign that has been launched in St. Louis. And our presenters for this campaign will be Sarah and Michaela. And they've been generous enough to share a brief bio with us that I will now share with you all, and then provide them some space to talk about this work. So we have Sarah. Sarah is currently on staff at AFSC as an intern. And for some reason, let me get this out of the way. Shucks, this is not working properly. I'm sorry, Sarah. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself? My screen just completely went blank.
Definitely. Yeah, you got the first part right. I'm currently the POTS intern here in St. Louis, while also pursuing a Master's of Social Work from Washington University at St. Louis and a Master's of Divinity at Eden Theological Seminary. And I have been on staff and working with the Real Student Safety Campaign since June, which is when this campaign was launched. And I love working with young people like Michaela, we call her Eminem, who you will be hearing from shortly, who is a senior at Northwest Academy of Law High School here in St. Louis, and is one of the student organizers for the Real Student Safety campaign. So as I mentioned, it's a fairly new campaign. I'm excited to learn from some of the other campaigns that are a little bit further along. But just to share briefly about some of what our early work has been, the first piece that we did was to reach out to Dr. Adams, who's the superintendent of St. Louis Public Schools, as well as the Board of Education, to just kind of gauge what their support and sense about policing in schools was. And at first, it was really awesome. We received immediate invitation to sit down and have a virtual Zoom meeting. And that Zoom meeting, according to us and all of our coalition partners, went great. We had a clear timeline. We were ready to run with it. And then we stopped hearing from the superintendent, Dr. Adams. And so we had to escalate our campaign a little bit. So we wrote an op-ed in the St. Louis American calling for St. Louis Public Schools to cut ties with the St. Louis Police Department. And we were really intentional with our language around cutting ties because the St. Louis Public Schools has taken a stance that they do not have a financial contract with the St. Louis Metro Police Department. However, all of their officers are trained and certified by the St. Louis Metro Police Department, and $6.3 million of funds currently goes to security services. And so we have had a lot of back and forth with our school board and with the superintendent around what does that mean? Where is that money going? What is this relationship? And staying hard on our position that we believe that there should be no ties between the St. Louis public school system and the St. Louis Metro Police Department. The second piece of our campaign that we've really worked on, and you can see this through the two images on the left side of your screen, which is strengthening old and building new coalition partners. And so this Children's March was a march that we did over the summer. It was really awesome. We marched from the St. Louis Metro Police Headquarters to the St. Louis Public Schools headquarters. Youth were at the center of it. We had some really awesome chalk art that was drawn on the concrete, asking young people to draw what their vision is of not having police in schools and what their vision of safety looks like. And so AFSC St. Louis has kind of taken on this role of really working to move the needle with our coalition partners away from just reforming police in school and really taking an abolitionist stance, that our dream and our hope and our vision is to not have police in schools. And so we're going to say that. We're going to hold signs that say remove police from schools, and we're going to make sure that we're standing in that abolitionist framework. You can go to the next slide. The last piece, and I'm going to let Eminem hop in here and talk about this, is that we are doing political education and youth engagement with our young people. So we did an online series about abolition for young folks aged 14 to 21 that Eminem was a part of. And then we did a real student safety art showcase, asking young people for their vision. So I included two of these beautiful pieces of art on the slide, a vision for gardening and community cooking as part of school lessons, and then a shift into mental health and moving support away, divesting from police and moving to mental health. And so Eminem, I'll pass it to you so that you can share a little bit of what your vision is, how you would reinvest that $6.3 million that St. Louis Public School uses.
Okay, so what I would use the $6.3 million that SOP is currently used on security services, I will use it to benefit the school and the students in it. There's no reason we should have to take foreign language online or take music classes after school because the district, when they can afford $6.3 million for the policing of students in school. I understand that it's meant to do more good than harm, but in most cases, that's not the case. I suggest replacing the policing of students in school with peer mediation. It's something that was used in my school and it actually worked. It was a great program and it helped diffuse a lot of situations. Peer mediation is basically where peers help mediate and resolve problems between groups and or individuals, and everything is confidential, and then most that I dealt with, issues never reoccurred. So I feel like that's a better alternative instead of policing in school.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Eminem. And now I think we're ready to move on to the Chicago campaign.
Thank you both. The work that you're doing is so important. It reminds me of a campaign AFSC did a number of years ago around If I Had $1 Trillion. It's so important to understand that with limited resources, the decisions that legislators and policymakers make, have such reverberating impacts on our children that we need to advocate for the types of things you guys are doing in St. Louis. So I'm looking forward to hearing your success stories. Chicago, cops out. Chicago Public Schools. Is that the next presentation? And that will be given by Anna and Nava, is that correct? I think it is.
Yes, indeed.
Okay. Great.
Yes.
So, and I'm sure we've all experienced when our computers decide to do an update at the most inappropriate time, and I apologize for that. But Nava, I understand that you are a Chicago-based organizer working with Brington Park Neighborhood Council and a CPS graduate, meaning you came from the Chicago Public Schools, and you're currently a freshman at DePaul, where you work on campaigns calling for defunding the police and community investment like No Cop Academy and Cops Out of Chicago's public schools. So we want to welcome you, and I understand that you'll be co-presenting with Anna, who I believe is also identified as Little Tree.
Mm-hmm.
And Little Tree is a Southside Chicago-raised organizer working with many organizations, but specifically Assata's Daughters and Black Lives Matter Chicago. Little Tree is a current Chicago Public School senior graduating from Kenwood Academy High School. There's a reason that it says boo, but maybe Little Tree, you'll explain that. And Little Tree has worked on campaigns also calling for the defunding of police and community investment like No Cop Academy and Cops Out of Chicago Public Schools. Looking forward to hearing from you both, so please take it away.
Hey y'all, what's up? I'm Little Tree, like they said already. Pronouns, anything said with love and respect. And yeah, like they referenced already, I'm a community organizer, like with some dope orgs like Asada's Daughters and Black Lives Matter Chicago. But most importantly, I intern with American Friends Service Committee, AFSC. And they're the ones responsible really for my heavy involvement within the No Cop Academy campaign, which blossomed into the Cops Out CPS campaign. And yes, I've been organizing to get cops out of my school since I was an abolitionist, and I was an abolitionist before I knew I was an abolitionist, so forever.
Yeah. Hi everyone. My name's Nava. She, her. Anything said with love and respect, honestly, it doesn't matter to me. And yeah, real kept, BPNC. And we also work with, I was a youth intern with AFSC, so that's how we got connected, and that's how I got really super close and amazing with Little Tree. That's how we run. Yeah, and so we're here to tell you guys about the campaign that we ran in Chicago throughout the summer to get cops out of our schools.
Yeah, I just want to say, I said boo to Kenwood Academy because that's my high school, but they support cops in our schools, disregarding what we think, disregarding what the youth think. And that's a horrible picture up there of me, y'all. That's a horrible picture. I don't look like that for real. But anyways, I just want to go over some quick basics and recap. There's some language that we're going to use that may be unfamiliar to some of y'all because, that Chicago lingo is the best. Shout out to Chicago, especially the South Side. So you may hear us reference like an SRO, and that basically is a school resource officer, which is basically a Chicago police officer, but within the school. And I would say it's the same as Chicago police officer, but more so like the biggest difference is they put into schools because they too bad for the streets, more of the story. And then you may hear us reference the LSC, which is a local school council, which is basically like a group of people from all within the school's community, from like alumni to actual current students, teachers, staff, admin, all at a table making decisions around the well-being of the school, And what else y'all should know? Oh, y'all should know when we say CPS that we're referencing, sorry, my notes is on my phone. When I say CPS, we're referencing Chicago Police. Whoa, wrong thing. Chicago Public Schools. CPD is Chicago Police Department, but CPS is Chicago Public Schools. And something you should know about that is we're going to be referencing a contract, and that contract basically was a contract between CPS, Chicago Public Schools, and CPD, Chicago Police Department, where basically the schools was like, yes, cops, we want you. We're going to pay you $33 million to be here. Anyways. And some other things y'all should know, especially within the Chicago Public Schools, is as of last year, 200 officers were named to be in 70 plus schools. So basically 70 plus schools altogether had 200 officers. And the goal of the Cops Out CPS campaign was more of the story was to cancel that contract. We did not want that $33 million contract, and especially we did not want our resources going to 12. That's another Chicago legal reference in the Chicago Police Department. We didn't want our resources going to the CPD, especially not in no dang pandemic when people don't even got Wi-Fi or computers to do their schoolwork in. So, yeah, and there's gonna be some links dropped about our research and our report. Check that out. But yeah, I'm gonna pass it to my good old buddy Nava.
Yeah. Honestly, like when we get, if we're getting CPD and CPS confused, that's how you know that, like, there's something going on. So yeah, we're gonna give a really brief recap because, like, honestly, this campaign has been going on for the longest, even before we even knew what the name of the campaign was. Honestly, we've been at this for a while. And so let's just do a brief recap of over the summer, because even though there was a pandemic right now, we were out almost every day of the summer. We were out there making some noise. It was the most emotional, awe-inspiring, yet traumatic summer of my life. It was amazing, but it was also a lot of processing with everything going on. And so we've done a lot of stuff. A lot of it was targeted towards the Board of Ed members, which is unelected in Chicago. We do not pick who they are. It's our mayor who picks it, which, by the way, nobody likes the mayor. I don't know where the people got this idea. We like the mayor. No one likes the mayor. She's not cool. We're not with her. And so we basically targeted her Board of Ed, and the LSCs, because the LSCs were the ones who were given the power for the vote, even though they did not have the power over the budget. So if LSCs voted to get the cops out of our schools, they wouldn't get to decide what they would do with that money, which makes no sense. But the Board of Ed just didn't want that responsibility, even though at the end of the day, all the decisions were made under Lori Lightfoot. And so it's like, at the end of the day, she is the target. And we did it was a lot of workshops. It was a lot of block parties. It was a lot of circles, sit-ins, jail support. Like, we were out there. People got arrested. Like, it was crazy. We were out there almost every day of that summer. But you know, like, even though we were targeting people like the president of the board, Miguelito or something, like, at the end of the day, this is about targeting Lori Lightfoot because she controls everything in the city. And like, everyone just does what she wants. But I mean, that doesn't mean we didn't get any actual achievements done. And even though we're still working on this campaign, we have to celebrate the stuff that we have gotten done, because there's so much amazing things that we have done, and it's so awesome to talk about.
Yes. For starters, that $33 million contract, we got chopped to $12 million. Who you know could say that? Who you know could say they did that in Chicago? Nobody. We did that. And in addition to that, we got cops out of 17 schools within Chicago. Like, come on now. Oh my gosh. Now, you want to tell them what else we did?
Oh my God. Like, the fact of the matter is, just like, when we were having the vote on whether to keep, when the board was doing the vote, and they were like, should we keep cops out or should we keep them in? And the fact that we got people to vote with us is super amazing in itself, because this board is the rubber stamp of Lightfoot. Like, they will do what she wants, but some of them actually voted with us and against Lightfoot. And like, that in itself is mind blowing to me, because I honestly did not think we would get anywhere, if I'm being honest. I was like, it's worth the fight, but I'm not expecting much. And so for us to get so close to getting these cops out of our schools is like mind blowing to me. Like,
I mean, it's even beyond just getting the cops out of the schools. Like, the campaign Cops Out CPS within Chicago changed the narrative of what we seen police to be. First of all, we can change the narrative on a lot of stuff. Hold on, let me break it down for you. First of all, change the narrative of adults thinking that you don't know what they need and what they don't know what safety is, that they can't name what they want, or even, that they don't know what their future should look like or whatever. It basically changed the narrative that you don't know what they be talking about. In addition to that, it changed the narrative that police equals safety. Again, like, there's this huge hashtag of defund the police, and like, connecting our work to that all the time. It's like, police do not need safety. Like, these people got medikits in the trunk of their cars and still don't know how to get up and use it. Like, police do not mean safety. And in addition to that, challenging the narrative that what was my third one? Basically challenging the narrative of what does supporting police look like and how it shows up in many ways. I have now learned that, like, I don't know, in any space where there's any adult willing or okay with the police officer being called, I am automatically distrustful of any and all adults in that situation. Anybody in my school building, just because, even though you may not call the police officer, the moment I realize and peep that, like, oh, you okay with somebody else calling police officer, I know now I can't trust you either. Like, if I mean, even at my family dinner, if I know that there's somebody in this room willing to call the police officer, I'm automatically distrustful of the space. So how much can I really trust these counselors, these social workers, the school, this building, if they're all willing to call the police? And why are they in my school anyway?
100%. We challenge the idea of what we've made people sit down and think, what does real safety look like? And people have found out that real safety is not behind a badge and cuffs and a taser and a bullet. There's no safety behind that. That is just agitation and like aggravation. Like, that is not healing, and that is not what we are here to do.
Yes, it definitely reminds me of, like, also going after Dwayne Trust and just conversations of Dwayne Trust as him as a target, who was a Board of Ed member, and just challenging his thought process of what addressing root causes of violence or harm looks like, and actually how that is the way we get to where we want to be. And it's not by continuously policing people, and especially Black and brown youth.
Yeah, at the end of the day, all of this is just to get cops out entirely and build a new thing where we invest in our people and ourselves.
Oh my gosh, Nava, do you remember that action at Miguel's house, my favorite action?
We will reminisce another day. There's so much, y'all.
All right, wow. So if anyone's ever doubted the value of young organizers, the energy, the passion that we just saw is so necessary to move the needle in this work. So thank you both so much. We're gonna move west, and we're gonna go to Oakland, where we will hear about the Fremont work to get police out of schools and that's going to be shared with us by Annie. Annie is a socialist and organizer from Fremont and was a member of the recent task force which recommended the end of the safety resource officers, I guess is what SRO stands for, program in Fremont. But you can correct me if I'm wrong, Annie, and it's yours.
Yep. So first thing, Fremont is not Oakland. We're not organizers in Oakland.
Probably.
Oakland and Fremont are
apologies.
different
Okay.
cities. And
Gotcha.
SRO is a school resource officer. They're literally cops. And right now they aren't in schools because school is virtual. They're literally just on beat, like they're regular cops. So I'm going to discuss how we got cops out of schools in Fremont. First thing we did, we got the item on the board agenda. This is really important because the only way a school board can decide on something is if it's on the agenda, and usually the board president decides when something goes on the agenda. So we showed up to public comment consistently and we got it on the agenda. And we gave public comment again when the board voted. And we lost, but we learned some things. Namely, we learned the makeup of the board. We learned we had 2 allies, 1 swing vote, and 2 opponents. The swing vote is going to be really, really, really important later. So instead of deciding on the issue, the board created a task force. And there are 3 things that we paid attention to with this. First was the composition of the task force. They originally wanted a cop to facilitate the task force. I know that's ridiculous. So we successfully lobbied the board to have a more logical task force composition with no cop involved. Second, we learned how to write a good task force application by someone who had already been on a task force, and we had a application workshop, so our applications were good. And lastly, we knew union reps would be on the task force because of the composition, so we reached out to unions as soon as possible to start building support in those spaces. And a lot of folks got onto the task force. So going into the first meeting, we had a plan. We knew what we wanted to accomplish. Namely, we wanted to create subcommittees to research the different impacts of SROs, depending on your local circumstances. If it comes to a task force, creating subcommittees might be a good idea. And this wasn't organized, but a member of the task force made a successful motion to replace the district appointed chair. I personally power mapped the task force. I put all of the names there covered for privacy reasons, but all of the names into a Google spreadsheet and colored those names based on whether I thought they were likely allies, unknown, or likely opponents. And then I reached out to the likely allies via Facebook Messenger. You might be able to find people like that on Facebook Messenger. And most importantly, we reframed public safety. And very, very early on, we agreed that all people on campus contribute to safety, definitely not police officers. So how did we, next slide, please. There we go. Yeah, how did we deal with our opposition? First, I'll be honest, we got kind of lucky that our opposition hadn't faced an effective challenger in a long time. So they didn't really know how to play defense that well. But we didn't spend time trying to convince the pro-SRO people, since we realized we were in the likely majority based on the power map. Instead, we built connections with the likely allies. We also included SROs and pro-SRO people, and we made sure to get their perspective. We didn't argue back right away. And instead, because we listened, we learned some, frankly, very, very problematic things about the status quo that we wouldn't have otherwise learned. But we also weren't afraid to say no sometimes, like saying no to cops presenting using our limited meeting time, especially because cops had presented before. And another effective thing we did was we looked through the public comments and we looked for stories about SRO interaction, people's lived experiences. Most of those stories were negative, so we included those. And our research was essential too. Next slide. There we go. Yeah, our research was essential too. The whole point of the task force was to research and come up with a recommendation and reasons. So we researched both SROs, the negative impacts of SROs, the impacts of SROs, and alternatives, emphasis on the and alternatives. We interviewed mental health professionals and learned about restorative practices. We researched a lot. Our report ended up being 69, I know, nice, pages long. And another fun thing was our police department refused to respond to our request for data in an expedient manner. Sometimes they never responded. If your police department does this and withholds data, you can often find useful data on the U.S. Department of Education Civil Rights Data Collection website. That's where we got a lot of our data. We also, in research, anticipated concerns by principals, and we addressed them. And we anticipated narratives. For us in Fremont, we're a suburban school district. The narrative is we're the exception to the national trends. If you're in a suburban district, that's probably the narrative too. Turns out we are exceptional and that we exceed national trends, which I did not know, but that's fun. And we also researched legal concerns. Depending on the local circumstances, there might actually be some legal issues with SROs and disparate impact. And we also learned from other school districts like Oakland, and we made sure the report was very comprehensive, and we got all of this in the report. So going into the final task force meeting, we won. The task force report passed 18-5, with the majority of students and even one principal voting yes. We won because we built consensus, and we made sure task force members, not staff, presented to the board. But our fight wasn't over yet. We needed the board to vote our way if we were to win. So we did some really important things between the end of the task force and the board vote. We did genuine community education, not debate, by hosting a town hall. And we advertised that town hall where we thought pro-SRO people would get their information from, so we could educate those people. Task force members from the teachers union presented at the PTA, the Parent-Teacher Association, and educated parents to counteract a lot of misinformation that some PTA members believed. We reached out and gave interviews with media, and we got endorsements from orgs ranging from student groups to the ACLU of Northern California. And we were getting new endorsements every day and announcing them to keep pressure up and build up this campaign. And remember the swing vote? We knew that swing vote was make or break. If we didn't get the swing vote, we lost. So we made sure to give extra attention to them, reach out to them more, and counteract any misconceptions they had because we needed their vote. So after all that, we won. We got the board to vote our way 3-2. And SROs are out of schools in Fremont. But this isn't the end. It took a hell of a lot of work. And we want to hopefully create a safety committee to implement our recommendations. And we also learned some things too. We probably should have involved student groups and community groups earlier, and would recommend, if possible, including these groups earlier too. So in conclusion, in some ways, I'll be honest, we got lucky. We had ally board members, the swing vote engaged with the material, our opposition was unprepared, didn't know how to play defense, and alums were here because COVID. But we also organized using effective tactics. We didn't give up when we lost the first time. We reframed safety holistically to what it actually is. And we engaged with our opponents to learn information and learn what their concerns were. So that is my presentation about our very recent win in Fremont.
Thank you, Annie. It's so important to hear success stories, especially when you're in the beginning of this type of campaign, to know that it's possible and to find luck where it's available to us. So thank you for sharing your success story in Fremont. Okay, we're going to move to Peralta, and we have two presenters that will talk about the efforts to get police out of higher education. And we will have Dr. Kimberly King, who was born and raised in Oakland and is currently a professor of psychology and ethnic studies at Laney College in Oakland, California. Also the co-coordinator of the Umoja, and I'm sure I butchered that, I apologize, Umoja's Black Student Success Community at Laney, and a co-founder of the Laney chapter of the Poor People's Campaign and the Black Minds Matter at Peralta Group. So welcome, Professor King. And I understand you'll be joined by Alicia Rea, who identifies as a queer Chicanx student, organizer, currently serving as chairman of the Associated Students of Laney College. So welcome both, and the space is yours.
Okay, great. So I'm going to start, and then Alicia is going to kill it at the end. Thanks for having us here. We're really excited. On May 25th, in the midst of a pandemic that was and still is killing Black, Indigenous, and poor people of all colors at over twice the rate of wealthy folks, we witnessed the public lynching of George Floyd, murdered by a police officer kneeling into his neck for over 8 minutes while neighborhood people begged him to stop. The police could not save George's lives that day, but his murder, along with so many others, was the spark that ignited a powerful, youth-led, multiracial movement against police terror and systemic racism, and to defund and abolish the police. That movement involved people of all colors all around the world, and we got to become a part of that movement. That movement aims to transform society from one that uses police to control poor people and communities of color, the people that need a new society, to transform it to a caring, cooperative society that works for everyone. We formed a group called Black Minds Matter at Peralta. It was a part of this motion. It was a group of faculty, students, staff, and still is, and community members. And the goal was, at that first goal, was to terminate the $4 million contract that the Peralta colleges have with the Alameda County Sheriffs. Our college district includes 4 colleges: Laney College, where I teach, Merritt College, and where Alicia is the student president, Merritt College, College of Alameda, and Berkeley City College. The way it started was a friend of mine from the union. We were just talking about the George Floyd murder and what we could do about, and the wonderful movement that was arising and what we could do. And we noticed that a lot of schools and colleges in particular were having a lot of conversations about racism and about unconscious bias. And I just didn't feel that was enough. The movement in the streets was saying talking is not what we need. Training in unconscious bias is not what we need. I did some research and I found that the Minneapolis Police Department had spent over $1 million on unconscious bias training just a few years before George Floyd was murdered. So we wanted to take action. So we started a petition. We decided to start a petition. My friend Adele did some research and found that if you got, I think, 1,200 signatures, you could usually convince a board to do something. So first we decided to write a petition. We drafted it. We reached out to other faculty, staff, and students that we thought would be interested and be able to mobilize other people. So that was in the Ethnic Studies department at my college. That was in a program called Restoring Our Communities for formerly incarcerated students at our college. And that was the student government, Alicia Rea, who's going to speak. And also one of our ethnic studies faculty brought in a community organization, the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights, and that's actually how we're even here today. We also worked, we got consultation with the Anti-Police Terror Network Project, and also with the Black Organizing Project, and with the Alliance of Californians for Community Empowerment led by Carol Fife. So we drafted the petition. We had about 1,700 signatures by the time of the board meeting. We sent the signatures to the board. We also had community orgs write their own letters to actually the community in Oakland. You know, I mean, Oakland is different from Fremont. Oakland, not to put Fremont down, but you know, Oakland is the founding location of the Black Panther Party, and even our school district is the founding of the Black Panther Party. Huey Newton and Bobby Seale were students at the time when they founded the party. But anyway, so we were able to get, so the city of Oakland is what I'm saying, the community organizers, even in addition to the people at the campuses, were already going after trying to defund the sheriffs. So we got a bunch of people to come and testify, and the community orgs got a bunch of people to come and testify. There were about 5 people testifying in favor of keeping the sheriffs, and we had about 35 testifying on the other side. We had a very supportive board, and especially about 3 members on there were particularly supportive, and they did vote unanimously on June 23rd to terminate the $4 million contract and to replace it with a community-based safety organization. So our next step is to implement a holistic safety and wellness plan. Sorry, I'm not even sending this. So this is the movement. So we're really operating on the defund the police model, which means to take money away from the police, divest from law enforcement, but also invest in vital human services. So now we're at the stage of trying to get the district to invest in vital human services. We came up with, here's our petition, but we came up with this action plan for holistic safety and wellness for the Peralta Community Colleges and District. And it includes mental health, investing in new mental health counselors. We found out in this research that we have only about 1/3 of the number of mental health counselors that it's recommended a college to have, when we have a lot of impoverished students, stressed students, students that have experienced trauma from law enforcement and other sources, a lot of unhoused students. So mental health is our focus. Restorative justice training throughout the campus is our focus, and also basic needs for students. Providing housing, food, technology is now a basic need under COVID. And so that's the stage at which we are at now. And we're going to keep moving forward. And we do have some supportive board members, but yeah, we're just going to keep moving forward. I'm going to give the rest of the time to Ms. Alicia Raya.
Thank you so much. It is such a privilege to be in community with you all. I'm deeply inspired by each and every one of you. So much pride to just be alive with you all. Yeah, and I could speak to my experience as a student leader on campus and just name the power that we, as just students, as young people, really, all students hold. I ran for president at Laney College. This was right before the uprisings, right? And so when the uprisings, oh no, hard to hear me, someone said. Okay, let's try this again. So when the uprisings began in June, I really, I called on each of us to think about what our role is, right? What can we do to prove that we are, engaging in this fight and pushing forward this idea that Black Lives Matter, right? So I decided to leverage my position, my privilege as a student leader, and look for my role. So that's what he reached out to me and was like, hey, you have this voice. This is what we're trying to do. What are you gonna do about it? Okay, I'm so sorry, you guys. I think my laptop is going down very soon, so bear with me. But I think that I just want to encourage folks to, run for student council, take up space at your board district meetings, leave public comment, because our voices are just very loud in those spaces, and they're taken seriously, and we can build those relationships necessary to get, just like every other example here, to really get those police out. But most importantly, to advocate for what students need, right? Students need housing, students need food, students need mental health resources. And so another thing that we did as we organized in collaboration with staff at Laney, through an abolitionist framework with the Poor People's Campaign at Laney also, was a teach-in where we invited these concepts of abolition, restorative justice, and had this conversation amongst upwards to 200 students and a few presenters, the Black Organizing Project, Our Joy, which focuses on restorative justice, and really just trying to keep this conversation, this open dialogue of what it means to transform our society, what it means to stand in solidarity with Black lives, and what it means to keep each other safe. And really this idea of like collective liberation, right? Because we are all free when, you know, the most oppressed, the most marginalized in our society are free, right? So I think it's just really important to build those relationships, to ask those questions and create space for students to, you know, think about these critically themselves and unpack that trauma, and really just be opened into this idea of abolition. Yeah, thank you so much. Any questions? Let us know. Otherwise, thank you guys.
Yeah. You know, thank you both, and thank you all. The sharing that we all were just gifted with will really inspire us as we move forward. And thank you again for being willing to lift up your work, the challenges and the successes. We had envisioned some time to have some back and forth conversation around a couple of questions, but I see that we're really fighting against the clock right now. So I'm just going to, with your permission, John, just present one question to the group for some responses, and then we'll move into the breakout. Are you okay with that, John?
Of course.
Okay. As people who do this work or watch this work from afar, we all realize how important it is to have impacted communities centered and, where possible, leading these efforts. So I'd like to just open the question to each of you. How important is it to make sure that young people are engaged in this work to get police out of schools? How has it helped you? How is it, why are you committed to making sure that young people are engaged and, where possible, leading this effort? So if there's anyone who wants to step up, or I will put on my teacher hat and call someone. Any of the presenters?
I can start.
Go ahead, Annie.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, as I just touched on in the presentation, centering students and especially impacted students is really important. We probably should have done it sooner, right? That's a mistake we made that hopefully in us sharing, other future organizers and current organizers learn to not make that mistake and not reinvent the wheel in that aspect. A lot of students actually spoke when the day the board voted, and some shared stories either about what SROs had done to them or their friends or other students. And while I can't say with absolute certainty what all of the reasons why board members voted the way they did, I can definitely posit and guess that that the firsthand accounts that students shared, right? Because students are the ones that, if there are SROs, interact with those SROs and see and see the harm that those SROs cause. So those students sharing those stories, I think, was really powerful and probably was a factor in how the board voted. I know one board member actually brought up a story that their daughter shared about the impacts of an SRO and the negative impacts of an SRO. And that was a reason that board member cited in voting to remove SROs.
Thank you, Annie. So the question again is, can you just share why you believe, if in fact you do, that centering young people is so important in this struggle? And I think we have space for one or two more sharings, and then we'll move into our breakouts.
I'll share really quickly. I think like this webinar is a great example of why we need young people at the center, right? Like I am sometimes considered a young person and sometimes not as a college student. And I have gotten so much energy out of the energy of what is being shared and the successes that are being shared. And as someone who studied history, I think it's also important to remember that a lot of the wins of the civil rights movement were because of young people. It was because of college students. It was because of the Children's March in Birmingham. You know, MLK was 26 years old when he started the Montgomery bus boycott. And I think it's important to like remember that young people have been at the center and have been the leaders of social movements throughout history and throughout, location.
Thank you, Sarah. You said it well. I see Dr. King, you're nodding. Is that an indication that you would like to respond?
I will briefly, but I was encouraging Rhea to respond.
Okay.
I also agree with what the young person just said. We'll see if she would like to respond, but I'll just say really briefly that, it was young people that led this George Floyd movement. It was young people that are going to transform society. It's young people that are leading Sunrise, that are telling what's his name? Biden, that he better, we delivered for him, he better deliver for us. And so, young people are, right now, we really need a movement to transform society. It is really, this COVID has really revealed all the underlying inequalities and inequities. And now we need to just transform the society. And it's going to be young people that understand that. They're already fighting for it. They already know. They're so sick of this society, they're not going to take it anymore. Oh, maybe Ray is going to say something.
All right, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I just think we have to trust youth leadership. We have to trust these ideas. We have to be willing to have conversation and more specifically trust Black leadership, right? Young and old, but especially young. Like it's their future. It's their material conditions. It's their school conditions, and so we have to center what they want and their vision of this reality that will soon be all theirs to own, right? Yeah. And how can we do this? Just support them and listen, like I said, trust them.
Thank you. And if you ever wondered about the power of young people, the presentation by Lil Tree and Nava made it real clear to all of us. So thank you all so much for sharing your stories and your time with us. And I don't know if you know how, but there's so much positive feedback in the chat. If you can figure out how to save it and put it on your wall or your refrigerator, you want to do it, because it certainly lifts up how much we all appreciate what you all are doing. So thank you for that. And John, I'm going to pass it off to you now.
Okay, we're going to take just a few minutes in small groups. I'm going to suggest that we take 10 to 15 minutes, I guess maybe 12 minutes. And we want to ask you in your groups to just take a couple minutes and talk about what is your relationship to schools locally? Is there already a campaign for police-free schools in your area? And what do you think are the obstacles? What do we have to overcome in order to get to police-free schools? We heard some inspiring accounts of how young people and their allies did that in several communities. What do you see? What do you see as the things that we're going to have to address in order to get to the kinds of victories that these campaigns have been working for and winning? And then again, yes, how do we center young people in the struggle? So you're gonna be automatically assigned to a group, and Diana, our tech magician, is going to also notify you when there are just a couple minutes left. We will then ask you to come back in and share in just a very few minutes at the very end. So as you all come back, welcome back to the main room. Encourage you all to write in the chat what you heard in this breakout that really struck you about how to center young people and students, about what are the obstacles people are facing, what experiences people have with schools, with your schools and your community, and efforts to have a different kind of security, different kind of safety in those schools. I see Sarah Nash saying we need to keep organizing locally and build a national movement, and Kimberly King saying, it would be great to have a national network. We heard all of these different experiences tonight, both from our presenters as well as in our breakouts. And there's so many different things going on that are not necessarily connected to each other. Yes, people can get discouraged by the moderates because the moderates they should be, we think maybe they're going to be on our side, and then it seems like they're not really listening or not really with us. Some of the obstacles identified are that the people in the community don't know it's a problem. And there's a lot of people who are working a lot, especially during the pandemic, and they don't have the time. There's money that protects the status quo. They've got the resources to mobilize pro-police voices. Really important to challenge the narrative that cops are necessary to keep us safe, and challenge that safety mindset that says it has to come from force. That came up in our group too, about how there's a fear narrative about school shootings that means that we must have, therefore there must be cops, even though that's extremely, extremely rare. And really important to make sure that teachers and the schools have investments in the services and restorative justice programs so that youth and teachers are supported. And of course, that's where the money can go, right? If we take money away from the cops in the schools, a lot of times people are saying, well, let's have services, whether that's counseling or mental health services in the schools. Shout out to Lydia that is organizing to get police out of school, and Leilani, who's in school right now looking for more ways to get involved. Another way that there's lots of different things going on out there that are not necessarily connected with each other. Massachusetts statewide Cop-Free Schools Coalition would love to hook up with other people. There's a link here. And I want to say that we're going to be writing to you all on Monday with resources. We'll gather the stuff that's in the chat, things that we've learned from the presenters and in these breakout groups and in the chat, in order to link us together and provide you with resources that help people organize in your own communities. Something from Peniel about resisting knee-jerk reactions that creates more problems. In some cases, SROs are being replaced with armed security guards. So that same paradigm of we got to have guys with guns in the school who can take charge can be, sometimes that gets replaced. Really important to engage more young men of color in this work. We heard in our small group about how a lot of times the most impacted people, their voices are not being heard. So it's super crucial to hear those voices and make sure that we reach out in order that those voices are heard. Something from Fremont, gather that powerful data. And, you know, Annie shared a website where you can gather data about what's going on in your community. And then compare that with what's going on in other populations, whether it's in your school district or neighboring ones. What are those metrics? How POC and BIPOC people, students are, or students with disabilities are suspended, are referred to law enforcement, are arrested. And then challenge the school district, and also, as we heard from Annie, challenge law enforcement when they don't provide data. Anything else that people want to highlight here? I'll just ask if anybody wants to, any of our facilitators or presenters want to highlight any one thing before we break.
I'll just
go ahead.
Kimberly, hi. I'll just say that again, I just, as several people said, I really think that it needs to be both national and local movement. And if there's any way we can all be in touch, or those of us who want to be in touch about making those connections, that would be great if you could share, if we could share each other's information.
Okay, that's going to be an important piece of follow-up for the group of folks who organized this event. And just thank you all so much for showing up here, showing up in your community, for all the work that you do, for the community organizing you do, for the truth-telling you do, for the young people who are so courageous in speaking up and saying what's really going on in your community. And so we'll see you on the next round. Thanks so much. And finally, there is a training for people who want to do events about police-free communities, a different model of community safety. which will be on December 15th. If someone can put that in the chat, maybe they already have. Oh yeah, it's already in the chat. And we will also send out that information to all of you on Monday. So thanks so much. Have a great evening, and we will see you on the path.